All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, first things first, sorry I have been gone for a couple weeks. I got sick again. Not that which must not be named. This is entirely food poisoning and mental health related. So yes, I have been recovering for a couple weeks. Just because I got really sick, and then my mental health took an absolute nosedive for a while, and I just felt like absolute crap for like a week and a half. So I am back. Second thing, the Races of the Multiverse thing. It's just not really doing that well for the channel. Barely anybody is watching. All my numbers are super down, and it just doesn't seem like anyone is really interested in it. Including, to be blunt, including me. I'm not really having that much fun making them because it's not. There's not that much that I can really delve into, and it tends to run into kind of the same things over and over again. So I'm going to be suspending that series for a bit. If you guys really do want me to continue, just comment and I will continue and finish off all the races. But we got almost about halfway through, and just people weren't watching it, and I wasn't having fun doing it. And so yes, I also found something else that I'm a little bit obsessed with. I was doing some unrelated research on, I think, Dimension 20 was what I was... I have to remember if this is what I was saying. Yes, Dimension 20. So I was doing a little bit of like unrelated research into a bunch of different things. I'm designing a new class and a bunch of other things. And so I started looking at Dimension 20 because I'm a fan of Brennan. And I found out that they did a series that used something that I had never heard of before. There is a supplement out. It's 100% free, which is another thing that I really like about it, called Star Wars 5e. And it is exactly what you think it is. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is D&D 5th edition. From what I'm reading and everything I've looked into, it looks like it is using the D&D 5th edition SRD, the Systems Reference Document, which is the completely open source version of D&D 5th edition. Anyone can take that and create their own game on top of it, and do whatever they want with it. That's how Pathfinder was created. Is they used the System Reference Document for 3rd edition to create their own game. And that's effectively what Star Wars 5e has done. However, due to the murkiness of copyright law and intellectual property rights, they're not selling it or anything like that because it is Star Wars themed. And it's really cool. It's a lot different than something like the recent the thing I did last year, effectively, for half the year. We did the Final Fantasy 14 cross D&D 5e. That itself was effectively an expansion to D&D 5th edition, and I based all my recommendations and the things on that based on, well, what would these classes and subclasses look like compared to the stuff in the player's handbook, to the point where they had, to do 2 jobs that were just subclasses of existing classes. So that was designed to be used in tandem with D&D 5th edition. Star Wars 5e is not. It is its own game. You are not meant to use the base classes of D&D 5th edition or the base races or anything from 5th edition to D&D in this. It is its own complete game that effectively uses the same rules system with some modifications to it. And overall, I am kind of pumped about it. I think it's really, really interesting. It makes some pretty big changes. For people that think 5th edition is too simple, first of all, you're wrong. But second of all, I do understand the thought process behind that. And Star Wars 5e takes some steps to make some changes. They also do some other things that I don't know if they were inspired by 4th edition or not, but they scratch the same problem that 4th edition tried to fix, which is the incredible imbalance between spellcasters and martial classes in D&D that has always been there. 4th edition was the absolute best at making both martial classes and spellcasting classes have similar power levels and feel similarly cool. And there's some stuff that they do in here that does give the ability for you to play a fully martial class and still feel as powerful and as cool as a spellcasting class. So overall, I've been impressed with it. I'm not 100% certain. Again, it's different enough that I can't say, well, I like this better than D&D. No, this is a completely different system. It has a completely different feel. I would not want to try to turn this into like a high fantasy style game. It is so rooted in the kind of fantastical science fiction that is Star Wars that I think you'd be doing it a bit of a disservice if you tried to kind of shift it into regular stuff. So anyway, if you've read the title of this, you know what I'm going to start with this. The actual list of classes in this, I believe that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's only 10 classes in the player's handbook of of Star Wars 5e. Compared to, I think it was like 12 or 13 in the original D&D 5e. But there's some stuff that they do there that I don't really feel like this has less choices for you. Like I said, I'll explain it as we actually go through it. But they have a monk class. They have other classes. They have, a consular and a guardian and a sentinel, stuff that you see constantly in Star Wars based RPG games, like video games like Star Wars The Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic and all those things where you could pick your class and stuff. Like, these classes seem very, very familiar. But they have a monk. And you guys know I'm a monk main. That's what I play. I love monks. So, of course, we're going to start with a monk. So, sorry for this being a little bit long of an introduction. I thought about doing like an in-depth review of it, and I may do that later. Again, let me know in the comments down below if you want me to do like a full-blown in-depth review of the books, because they have 4 core books. They have a player's handbook. They have Let me see if I can get. Here we go. They have a player's handbook. They have Scum and Villainy, which is effectively their monster manual. They have Starships of the Galaxy, which is just dealing with starship combat and stuff like that. So there is no equivalent in D&D 5th edition because ships are just not as big a deal in D&D as they're going to be in a Star Wars game. That's just how it is. So they have an entire book on starship and space combat. And then they have Wretched Highs, which is effectively your Dungeon Master's guide. Yeah, again, 100% free. It's sw5e.com. I'll have a link in the description for you to go and download whatever you want to your heart's desire. They also have a character builder that's still got some kinks being worked out for it. But it's on that website as well. They have so many different assets for you to make this as easy as possible for you to jump into. That, yeah, it's just super cool. But anyway, let's dive into the Star Wars monk. Yeah. So before we go into this completely, quick refresher on 5th edition class design. In 5th edition, every class is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, classes have these things that we call defining features. A defining feature is either something unique to the class, or maybe it's not unique to the class, but it is something that the class gets earlier, or they can use in a different way. Because this is still using D&D 5th edition for its bones, basically it's all based on the 5th edition SRD, I'm still going to be expecting every single one of these classes to have a defining feature that they focus on and things like that, or multiple defining features, just like I did with the Final Fantasy 14 crossover. Yeah, let's dive into this. So, the monk. So this is something that I think a lot of people are going to have problems with at first glance. Because when people think of Star Wars, they don't really think about someone going in and, punching and kicking, unless you watched Rogue One, which is a brilliant Star Wars movie. I would say probably on par. I'll go as far as to upset some people. I would say Rogue One is probably on par with the original trilogy as far as just how good a movie it is. It's really, really fun to watch. The characters are really, really likable, or unlikable, some of them, but the fact that they give you this kind of visceral response to them is good. And that's really the only time we see kind of martial arts, quote unquote, in the Star Wars universe. Everything else is either you shoot things or you're a Jedi, and Jedi martial arts, as we've seen in most things, is almost entirely based on swordplay, specifically with their lightsaber. We don't really see Jedi learning unarmed combat, despite the fact that lore-wise, Jedi do learn a little bit of unarmed combat. However, the monk in Star Wars 5e is not a Jedi. Again, remarkably similar to the character from Rogue One. I have to remember. I feel really bad because I can't actually remember. It's Donnie Yen, and he effectively plays a very kind of famous archetype in Chinese folklore, which is the blind monk. And that's who Donnie Yen plays, and that's kind of the feel that I get from the monk in here. Again, this monk is almost identical to the monk from the 5e SRD. It has very, very similar things, but they do make some changes in there. So if you want to play a character very similar to Donnie Yen's character, I'm gonna butcher the name. It's Chirrut Imwe, I believe is the character's name. I don't think they really call him by his name that much in the movie. But if you want to play a character like that, or you're like me and you just like playing monks, this is the class that you want to deal with. So let's start off with class features. Again, this is going to be very, very similar to what you would see for the regular monk, with some changes that I'll mention. So hit points, D8 per monk level, same thing. Hit points are 1 plus Constitution. Higher levels it's the same thing. Proficiencies, you have no armor proficiencies. Weapons, this is where things start getting a little bit different, because the weapons in Star Wars 5e are drastically different from the weapons in. Yeah, I know. Calm down. Are drastically different from the weapons in D&D 5th edition, because they have kind of different classes. So when you look at the weapon proficiencies that the monk has in Star Wars 5e, you have simple blasters, which is effectively going to be very similar to your simple ranged weapons in 5th edition. They just call them blasters instead of bows and arrows and things like that. Simple vibro weapons. This is where the big distinction comes in with Star Wars 5e, is they have two different kind of flavors of melee weapons. You have vibro weapons, which don't really require the force or anything. They're just they're effectively just like swords and the things like that have a motor in them that make them vibrate, so that edged weapons into the things like that will cut a little bit more, because it's always vibrating. That means effectively the blade is always moving, which if you're unfamiliar with how swords and blades work in general, and this is not just like for weapons, this is the same way I tend to use cooking instruments to kind of explain exactly the difference between like chopping and slicing weapons are. For a chopping weapon, like a meat cleaver, you basically, the way that it works is you have a point, but the point doesn't technically have to be that sharp. It needs to be somewhat sharp, but the thing that causes a cleaver to work, which is how all chopping weapons work, is you get a lot of force, and it magnifies that force into a very small point, and then it goes down, and then because you have all of this force, or all of this mass put under a very, very small edge. Your basic physics equation, force equals mass times acceleration. That's what it is you use acceleration and mass. It's a heavy cleaver, and you swing it fast, and it chops through things, because as it impacts, it forces all the atoms in the thing that is chopping to move to the side. That's how chopping weapons work. Slicing weapons are much more similar to like a chef's knife. A lot of people don't realize that the chef's knives, like the big, cutting knives like that, you don't technically use them to chop. That's what a cleaver is for. Chef's knives are slicing weapons. That's why they're curved. The reason curved weapons exist, and the reason that the chef's knife is curved, is so that it forces the object to actually move along the blade, and it technically gives you a longer cut for less amount of movement. That's why curved weapons like the scimitar or saber are shaped the way that they are, because you use less movement, but because of the curve, it forces the object to move along the blade, which effectively gives you a longer cutting surface. And the way that slicing weapons work, similar to a chef's knife, is you want to bring the knife across, and it slices as it moves. Well, with a vibrating weapon, it basically means that the edge is constantly moving. It's kind of like almost a sawing motion, but very, 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 very quick. And so that's how vibro weapons, quote unquote, are supposed to work. It actually kind of combines the force that you can put behind chopping with the basically extended cutting surface of a curved slicing type weapon. So that's what vibro weapons are. And they have proficiency in simple vibro weapons and martial vibro weapons that lack the dexterity, heavy, special, and two-handed properties. I do not know what the dexterity property is. I haven't looked that far, but heavy, special, and two-handed are our properties from 5th edition. So pretty simple as far as that. for people that like I mentioned in Pathfinder, this is the second edition when I've talked about it quite a few times. They have so many different weapons and so many different kind of qualifications for weapons that it becomes mind-numbingly complicated, and it's obtuse in its complication. The exact same weapon in D&D 5th edition can actually be separated into, I think it was like 6 or 7 different weapons in Pathfinder 2nd edition, and each one would require a different proficiency in order to use literally the exact same weapon with just different flavors added to it. I don't know. Again, I haven't really looked through the weapons section, so I don't know if they went that crazy. But with the fact that the only word that I see here that I don't recognize is dexterity, and I can probably guess what dexterity means. It's probably similar to the finesse property, though the finesse property does exist in this as well. I'm thinking it's probably not as bad as Pathfinder, or especially Pathfinder 2nd edition. Tools, they get no tool proficiencies. Saving throws, they get strength and dexterity, which is a little bit different from the monk, if I remember correctly. No, it's exactly the same. I guess I never realized that monks get strength saving the throws as a proficiency. Because eventually monks get all saving throws as a proficiency. And it's been a while since I've played a low-level monk, so live and learn. And then your skills, choose 2 from acrobatics, athletics, insight, lore, perception, and stealth. Lore is a new one. I would assume it's effectively what replaces history. So, yeah. And then for equipment, you can choose a vibro weapon with which you are proficient, or a simple blaster and a power cell. Power cell is your ammo, effectively. A Dungeoneer's pack or an Explorer's pack, and then 10 vibro darts. So, effectively, anytime you're going to see the word vibro, just chop off the vibro, and it's probably going to be very similar to what we have in 5th edition. The other version of weapons that they don't talk about here, but we will talk about later, are what are called light weapons, which are things like lightsabers. Yeah. We're not going to go too crazy into the physics and everything behind lightsabers and stuff like that. But probably the biggest thing to understand is in the Star Wars universe, with a few very, very, very rare exceptions, you have to be proficient in the Force, at least minorly. You don't have to be a Jedi or a Sith or something like that. But you just have some sort of Force proficiency in order to use a lightsaber or anything kind of derivative from it, for a number of reasons. One, to actually build one, they actually have to be built by the Force. If you've ever played Star Wars The Old Republic, if you do the Consular or the Jedi Knight, at least the old one, I don't know if the new one, they've changed it. You actually build your lightsaber, and they kind of show you putting it together. And throughout that entire MMO, they have scenes repeatedly where they're showing, Jedi building their lightsabers. You see them put all the parts up, and they kind of put them together with the Force. That is actually lore accurate. You cannot just go to a shop and go, hey, here's all the pieces for a lightsaber, build me up a lightsaber. It has to be assembled by the Force. It is impossible not to. And then to actually use it, you have to have some ability to manipulate the Force. If for no other reason than the blade has no weight, and because of that, there's a sense that I can never remember what it's called. But the sense is effectively your ability to know where your limbs are without looking. As much as everyone says, oh, there's only 5 senses and a 6th sense is super. No, this is an actual sense. It is effectively a 6th sense that every single person in the world has. If you close your eyes and you put your arms out, you know where they are, despite the fact that you can't see them. There's nothing telling you where they are. You're not hearing them around you. You just know where they are because they're connected to you. Well, when you're holding something, that sense can extend to whatever you're holding with a little bit of training, because the weight of it, you can feel the weight of it, and that's how learning how to use a weapon works. Because a lightsaber has no mass in the blade is made of light, and so it has no mass, there is no possible way for a normal human being to know where the blade is. And so it is incredibly easy to cut your own limbs off if you don't have the force effectively telling you where the blade is. It's one of the reasons why non-force sensitive people generally can't just pick up a lightsaber and use it, because again, they will probably end up hurting themselves. And this actually has some historical accuracy put into it in the idea of flexible weapons. Flexible weapons, you can't use that sixth sense. I wish I could remember what it's called. If anyone looks up what it's called, put it in the comments down below, because for the life of me, I can't remember. But it's a real thing. Flexible weapons, you can't use that because they flex. And so just by guessing from the weight, you can't really tell where they are without a little bit of training. It's one of the reasons why nunchucks in an untrained hand are significantly more dangerous to the person using them than to anybody else, because you can't tell where it is until it hits you. The same thing is true with everything from like the rope dart, whips. Any kind of flexible weapon is very dangerous for the user themselves until they learn how to use it. But there's still weight, there's still momentum in a flexible weapon, so you can kind of figure out where they are. With a weapon that has no mass, no weight to it whatsoever other than the handle, there's no possible way you can know where the blade is unless you are always looking at it. And anyone that's done any sort of combat knows you cannot always stare at your blade. You cannot even keep your blade peripherally in your vision, because that's not what you need to be focusing on. You need to be focusing on your opponent. So light weapons are the only thing that is the other flavor, and they've got tons of them too, which is funny, to be blunt. Yeah, they show up some weird, like they have light whips in the expanded universe, which is now the Legends universe, which are kind of cool, but they start getting more and more crazy, like light nunchucks and stuff like that. They exist in Legends, but it gets silly really quick. Anyway, let's get back to this. So that's the class features. By the way, this is going to be a long video, because we're covering the base class. I'm not going to cover any of this. This is subclasses. But we get into the second level, you'll find out why everything is going to be a little bit longer with the base classes. So, moving on. Next, we have martial arts. This is almost word for word taken from the monk class features from the SRD, which again, not a bad thing. I don't think you should try to make a new class using the class features of an old class, or like putting together multiple class features from different classes. That's a recipe for disaster. But this is literally just recreating the monk in a different, a slightly modified system. So yeah, they should. However, they do have some differences. So they talk about monk weapons. And monk weapons are vibro weapons with which you are proficient that lack the dexterity, heavy, special, and two-handed property. So basically everything, all the vibro weapons, so melee weapons, that you're proficient in are now monk weapons, which is almost identical to what the regular thing is. However, the first thing for martial arts, in the original monk class, it specifically says you can use dexterity instead of strength, the attack and damage rolls of your unarmed strikes and monk weapons. This is your unarmed strike and monk weapons gain the finesse property. And that is a massive, massive difference. I mention all the time, word choice is really, really important when you're designing RPG material, specifically for 5th edition, but for any game. Your word choice is very important. And changing this from you can use dexterity instead of strength to they have the finesse property changes a ton of things. Specifically, there are quite a few feats that require you to use weapons with the finesse property. Things like the rogue's sneak attack, which they don't have rogues in this, but they have an equivalent, requires you to use a weapon with the finesse property. With how they have changed martial arts, that means a monk's unarmed strike can get sneak attack if they somehow get those two abilities together. A monk can use their unarmed strike to use the defensive duelist feat, which again I'm not sure if they have in here. They may. I haven't done a deep dive on the feats yet. But there's a lot of different things that require finesse weapons as opposed to a weapon that uses your dexterity modifier. So it was a conscious choice for the designers of 5th edition to not make unarmed strikes and monk weapons in general be finesse weapons, because it massively changes how a bunch of other things interact with them. Is this a mistake for this? Well, I don't know. I haven't looked through every single class to see how broken that can be. I just know in regular 5th edition, it is a huge no-no to allow martial arts to be finesse weapons. It changes so many things. So that is most definitely a huge change. And this is obviously martial arts is a defining feature. Again, I can't remember if I mentioned this. Defining features need to show up within the first two levels for them to be defining features in 5th edition. This is obviously a defining feature. The next aspect, change the damage die. You use a D4. They do change things a little bit in this, where in 5th edition, regular 5th edition, it starts as D4. It eventually turns into a D10. For Star Wars 5e, it eventually turns into a D12. And that's something you're going to see just in general. The Star Wars 5th edition characters tend to be a little bit more powerful than D&D 5th edition characters, just in general. The numbers are going to be slightly bigger. Their abilities are going to be slightly more powerful. They get additional feats, which we'll talk about in just a second here. So everything like that, this is going to be a little bit more powerful. It also means the monk, again, in 5th edition, the monk is a control specialist. Going from a D10 to a D12 is not a huge difference. You're looking average damage is just 1 additional damage per attack, but monks get a lot of it at attacks, so that 1 additional damage can turn into a lot, especially when you start dealing with crits and other things like that. So this monk actually can probably, depending on the subclass and the different vows that you take for it, might actually be able to go toe-to-toe with some damage dealing if you wanted to just be a pure damage dealing monk. Now, do I think that's the absolute best way to play the monk? No, I still think this monk is going to be a little bit more control focused. I would be upset if it wasn't, because that's my favorite part of playing a monk. But this monk has a lot more bite than the regular 5e monk. So the next thing is entirely new, and I cannot be more happy about this. You can use dexterity instead of strength whenever you would make a strength athletics check to grapple, shove, or trip a creature. Something that was built into the original version of D&D 5th edition that has largely been ignored going forward. And I don't really understand why, because there was a lot of promise to this, is the idea that skills are not 100% tied to attributes. What I mean by that is when the proper vernacular, when you're asking for a skills check in D&D, is to say the attribute and then the skill. So I need you to make a strength athletics check. I need you to make a dexterity acrobatics check. The reason why that is the correct vernacular is in the rules of D&D 5th edition, you don't have to use strength to make an athletics check. you technically can make an intelligence athletics check if you could come up with some reason why it would make more sense for you to use your intelligence score than your strength score. Maybe if you were really, really smart and you were using leverage and things like that instead of just brute strength. But most of 5th edition have completely forgotten that that is a thing, and most DMs will just go, "Hey, I need you to make an athletics check," and they will mean make a strength athletics check because they assume that athletics is exclusively tied to strength. That's not true, and this is a perfect example of a problem I've had with the 5th edition monk, which is you cannot make a grapple monk. Because the monk is in 5th edition is a mad class, a multi-attribute dependent class. You need both dexterity and wisdom for everything the monk does. They both go into their AC score. Wisdom is used for most of your focus, or not focus. That's what we'll deal with here. Most of your key abilities. Use your wisdom score instead of your dexterity, and dexterity you need for your attacks and things like that. So most monks are going to spend most of their time improving both their dexterity and their wisdom, and then get 1, maybe 2 feats in addition to that as they level up, but they don't have enough time to also get a high strength score. So making a grapple monk just doesn't work. Grappling, to escape a grapple, you can use dexterity acrobatics. But to make a grapple, you can only use strength athletics. And so grapple monks in general just don't work. One of the reasons I liked the Astral Self monk is it actually gave you a way to become a grapple monk because you could use your wisdom in place of your strength when you had your arms out. This lets any monk be a grapple monk. And again, I have a history in martial arts, and I have a lot of friends that do martial arts. And anyone that has ever studied grappling in martial arts, size and physical strength is useful in grappling in martial arts. It is not essential. I have seen very, very small girls throw very, very large muscular men around the room like a rag doll. It is significantly more important to have fine control over your digits and your limbs and things like that, and to understand anatomy and leverage for most grappling styles. Now, again, if you have 2 people that, if you have 2 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu masters going up and one of them is twice the size of the other one, the one that's bigger is going to have an advantage. Longer limbs, more. I'm not saying that strength is completely useless in grappling. However, the emphasis that 5th edition puts in, where if you want to grapple someone, if you want to grab something, the only way to grab them is to overpower them, is simply not based in reality and is boring. And this means the monk is very, very different from any other class. As far as I can tell, again, I haven't read through other classes. This may be a common thing in Star Wars 5th edition. So, feel free as I go through more of this to laugh at me when I find out, oh, everyone can do this? Okay, monks don't feel as special anymore. But I hope this is a monk thing. Because, again, this allows you to build a monk that doesn't exist in 5th edition, which is a grapple monk. Grappling is a really useful thing that has been hamstringed really, really bad in 5th edition for players. For monsters, there are so many different monsters that get auto grapples and auto restrains and things like that, where if a player wants to grapple or restrain, they have to do a lot and make a lot of sacrifices to the point where it's really not that useful for a player to do. But for enemies, it's remarkably useful. And this, I think, is one of those things that allows it to kind of shift back. Monks can grapple now. You can replace an attack with a grapple check. And that's just how the 5e system works. So this allows a monk to grapple and then punch people. I love that. I think it's super, super cool. And it's not just grapple. You could also shove or trip a creature. So all of those things are useful. Now, this does not mean you can use your dexterity acrobatics. What I was saying before, Instead of making a strength athletics check, you would make a dexterity athletics check. So one of the skills that you can be proficient in is athletics. So if you're proficient in athletics and you make a grapple check making dexterity athletics, you would still add your proficiency bonus to it, but you would add your dexterity modifier instead of your strength modifier. So everything about this I love. It brings up an aspect of 5th edition that still exists that even the designers have just thrown out the window as, well, we're never going to use that. Brings it back. And it lets monks grapple. I love that. The only thing that would make it better is making it so grapples are actually useful. Because again, for players, especially if you want to restrain someone, you have to take a bunch of feats, and it's just not good. But this is a step in the right direction. I'm super excited about that. So next, when you use the attack action with an unarmed strike or a monk weapon on your turn, you can make one unarmed strike as a bonus action. And the final bit, and that's exactly the same as the D&D monk. The final change, you can take the dash or disengage actions as a bonus action. Now, the monk is already really bonus action based. In D&D, excuse me, I haven't spoken in like a week. So forgive me if I'm drinking a lot. In D&D 5th edition, the monk is very, very bonus action focused. Your flurry of blows is a bonus action. Your extra attack is a bonus action. Step of the wind, patient defense, bonus actions. Monks get a bunch of other kind of bonus action based, like they have so many uses for their bonus action. Giving them the ability to dash or disengage is a little bit weird. Again, that feels like it's flirting with the rogue's cunning action. Again, there isn't a rogue in this. There's an equivalent. I think the scout is the equivalent of the rogue. But it does feel like you're infringing a little bit on the rogue. That being said, it kind of makes sense. Again, the monk is a hypermobile class. Monks get a higher base speed than any other class other than the barbarian. Patient defense step of the wind used to be what you used to dash as a bonus action. It was a really, really useful thing. It would step of the wind effectively gave you both the dash and the disengage action as one thing, and it just cost you a key point. So this allows you to do either dash or disengage without that. And it does, again, feed into that hypermobility that's built into the D&D monk. And again, it means that this monk, if you compare the Star Wars monk to the D&D monk, the Star Wars monk is going to be a little bit more powerful. It's going to have a few more options available to it. So again, you cannot mix these systems. But I'm not 100%, I'm not really upset that they're doing that. I think it, again, the control, the limiting factor of that is you only have one bonus action per turn. And you already need to choose, okay, do I want to make my additional attack? Do I want to use one of my other things? Or do I want to use this dash or disengage thing? It gives you choices. It doesn't give you a right answer, which is what good design should do. So that is martial arts. Really long, but yeah. Excuse me. Moving on. Unarmored Defense. This is another first level thing. It's almost identical to the D&D monk. The difference being your AC equals 10 plus your dex plus either your wisdom or your charisma modifier, your choice. So, this is another thing that's unique about the Star Wars monk, is you can use charisma instead of wisdom for just about, for everything. Which I find to be really, really interesting. Mostly because the idea of wisdom, as far as the monk is concerned, is wisdom is kind of, not only is wisdom kind of your street smarts, but because you use wisdom saves to avoid things like compulsions through magic, charmed effects and stuff like that, Wisdom tends to also represent your self-control. Wisdom is what effectively replaced will saves from previous editions. So your wisdom, being kind of your self-control, fits into kind of the lore of monks, the kind of magical wushu monks that they're based on. Is it's through self-control and discipline that they can do these things. Charisma is your ability to influence others in a bunch of different ways. And some people have took that as kind of enforcing your will on other people, so giving it that kind of, it fits with willpower as well. Again, there are some spell effects where you make charisma saves. I think for things like charm effects from like vampires and succubi and the things like that. You'll make charisma saves instead of wisdom saves sometimes to kind of feel like you're effectively influencing yourself. So making that kind of definition of charisma as imparting your own will on someone else. And I think that's kind of where they're getting this from a lore perspective. I don't know. I haven't talked to the people that wrote this or anything like that. I sincerely doubt I'm going to get the ability to talk to the creators like I was able to with Final Fantasy XIV Cross D&D, because I was able to go to their Reddit and it was small enough that when I made posts there, everybody tuned in, including the creators and the writers of it. I sincerely doubt I'll be able to get that kind of interaction with this, but if I had to make a guess, I think that's probably where they're getting that. From more of a mechanics perspective, again, this just allows for much more varied builds, which again, I'm not really against. I think it becomes a problem if you could replace anything. Like if you could use wisdom, charisma, or strength. If you could just use any 2 scores as you want, I think that creates a problem if there's no limitations built into that. Because then when you are trying to min-max, that makes it super, super easy to min-max into some crazy, crazy broken things. Charisma, other than being the spellcasting ability for warlocks, sorcerers, and bards, charisma just really isn't used a ton in 5th edition for abilities. It's used for skills. Again, your persuasion, your intimidation, deception, those are all charisma-based things, and they're a lot of fun to play. Having a very charismatic monk, I think, would be a lot of fun to play, and not having to kind of limit yourself by, I want to be a very charismatic monk. The idea of like the word monk in Western society, monks are people that devote themselves to the church, and there were monks who would go out and evangelize and share their faith, and like that was their calling. And so if you wanted to create one of those kind of evangelical style monks, and when I say evangelize, I don't specifically mean Christianity. I mean anyone that's trying to convince other people that their belief structure is correct, whether that's religious, whether that's eating preferences, whatever it is. That's all a form of evangelizing. So if you wanted to create a monk like that, whose purpose is to kind of go out and evangelize to people and convert people to their religion or their belief structure, you can do that in Star Wars 5e. It's significantly more difficult to do that in D&D 5e. So again, this is a change. As much as it seems like it's literally just letting you choose a different stat to do this with. However, that tiny change makes for massive, massive changes when you're looking at multi-classing, when you're looking at feats that give you access to spells and things like that. Like there's so many things happen when you change just a single attribute requirement. But overall, I think it's a cool idea. Like I'm not really having an issue with any of the changes that they make here, until I get a chance to playtest any of this stuff. Yeah, Or it's cool. I like it. I think it's cool. Moving on. Starting at 2nd level, you get focus. Focus is key. Is what it is. Again, they do make some changes. In D&D, focus is entirely based on your wisdom, or key is entirely based on your wisdom. Focus in Star Wars, wisdom or charisma. And that's the big difference of the focus system, is just you can use either wisdom or charisma. So again, it means that you can have a more charisma based on monk. And then they give you 3 focus abilities, 3 key abilities. And they're the same ones you're familiar with a twist. Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense, Step of the Wind. Now, we've already talked about Step of the Wind cannot be the same as it was, because you already have some of Step of the Wind built into martial arts for free. So if you have to use a focus point instead of a key point, if you have to use a focus point to use Step of the Wind, it's never going to be useful enough to justify using a key point for it unless they change something. And they change something in every single one of these. So, let's look at it. Flurry of Blows, when you make a martial arts bonus action attack, you can spend 1 focus point to make an additional unarmed strike. No action required. At 11th level, you can instead spend 2 focus points to make 2 additional unarmed strikes. So there's 2 big changes here. First, Flurry of Blows in D&D is specifically immediately after you take the attack action on your turn, you can spend 1 key point to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action. That is very specific. First things first, that means you cannot make your bonus action attack and then decide to do Flurry of Blows, because you've already used your bonus action to make an unarmed strike in D&D. You have to choose to use Flurry of Blows before using your unarmed strike. The other thing is immediately after you take the attack action. So effectively, right after your first or second attack, if it's after level 5, you have to use your Flurry of Blows, which some people have interpreted as you cannot move between the Flurry of Blows attacks or between making your attack action and then Flurry of Blows. They all have to be against the same person. This one is significantly less restrictive. When you make your martial arts bonus action attack, you can spend 1 focus point to make an additional unarmed strike. Mechanically, it does still mean that it says when you make, so once you make it, it doesn't say after you make it. So it is something you have to choose when you make the bonus action attack. But you no longer technically have to declare Flurry of Blows instead of your bonus action. This is in addition to your bonus action. So that wording does change things slightly. It does mean that you can move between attacks, and there's really no gray area to say, well, no, you can't. There's no immediately built into it. And then 11th level, you can spend a little bit more focus to make 2 instead of 1, which again means that the monk has more attacks than literally any other class. It used to be fighters at level 20 got a 4th attack, and so monks and fighters made the same number of attacks if the monk Flurry of Blows. However, now they can actually make more attacks than a fighter unless the fighter is 2-weapon fighting. So again, adding that additional attack changes things. We've talked about how in 5th edition, action economy is super, super important. Whichever side has more actions they can do, and that includes movement, bonus actions, number of attacks, they're going to have an advantage. This means that the monk, even more so, is going to be affecting the action economy, because now they can just give themselves additional actions that no other class gets. There's no other class that can use a bonus action to make 2 attacks. Everyone else can use a bonus action to make 1 additional attack. So that's a big deal. Going to patient defense, When you use your bonus action to disengage, you can spend 1 focus point to also dodge. And then 11th level, you can instead spend 2 focus points to dodge and gain an additional reaction until the start of your next turn. So this is a pretty big deal, and I believe, because I've read the they have an online version of this. I'm looking at a PDF because it's just easier for me to read, just with how the PDF is set up. They have an online version where it specifies you can only make one reaction per turn. So you are still a little bit limited where you can make multiple reactions using patient defense, but it's still limited 1 reaction per turn. So on one character's turn, if they attack you twice, you can only react once to them, and then another character attacks you on their turn, you could use your second reaction then, which I think is a good thing. That is not in the PDF that I have of the player's handbook. So I'm assuming there are errata that just haven't been put into this particular printing. But now patient defense is built on the disengage action, which I find really interesting because in 5th edition, I would never really link patient defense to disengage. Patient defense, the way that I see it best used is you actually go into a situation and make yourself look like a valuable target. You want to be in the worst position possible because patient defense means that they have disadvantage in all their attack rolls against you, meaning they're probably going to waste some of their attacks. It's the entire purpose of patient defense. It's a action economy manipulator. This allowing you to disengage and then also patient defense does paint patient defense as more of a defensive ability for yourself, not an offensive ability meant to waste the enemy's actions, which is, I think, how it is best used. However, I gotta say, I like the fact that focus is building on martial arts as opposed to it being its own thing. You know, Ki is its own thing. It's a defining feature of the monk in D&D, and it is entirely its own thing. It doesn't really interact a ton with anything else other than flurry of blows, giving you some extra unarmed strikes. The focus feels much more linked to martial arts. It almost feels like an upgrade of martial arts instead of its own defining feature, which I like. Again, I'm not particularly fond of the idea that patient defense is an entirely defensive option. If you use it as an entirely defensive option, you're really going to be doing yourself a disservice and you're going to be doing your party a disservice. But again, this is an extremely common thing. I see people that don't understand how to play the monk using it. Is it, oh, this is to make sure that people don't hit me? No, it's to help the enemy waste attacks, because that's what the monk excels at, is controlling the action economy. So this, to me, absolutely was written by someone that thinks patient defense is entirely defensive. I'm not saying it can't be used defensively. It's a very effective defensive maneuver, but the best way to use it, and the thing that's going to do the best for your party, is to wander into a group of enemies and then patient defense and let them all just wail on you and only get 1 out of their 5 attacks to actually land. It's risky, but especially if you keep your AC at a decent level, it is unbelievably useful. So, yeah, interesting. And then Step of the Wind, when you use your bonus action to dash, now Step of the Wind is built on upgrade your dash effectively. You can spend 1 focus point to double your jump distance for the turn, and then at 11th level you can instead spend 2 focus points to gain a flying speed equal to your walking speed until the end of your turn. Though you fall if you end your speed in the air, nothing else is holding you aloft. So, doubling your jump distance, to me, that's never going to be worth a focus point. Jumping is so infrequently used in 5th edition, and again, it may be different in Star Wars because jumping, like Jedi jump all the time in the movies, like constantly. As much as people despise the prequel trilogy, which I don't agree with, it's not as good as the originals, but they're still decent movies. But watch the fights, watch the final fight between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and and Darth Maul, and you will see these guys jumping all the time. And you see it in every other kind of Star Wars thing. Is that Jedi are always just jumping on everything. So it's possible that jumping is a significantly more useful thing in Star Wars 5e instead of D&D 5e. But if it's used the same way as it is in D&D 5e, no one ever uses the jump rolls. They exist, nobody ever uses them. That being said, flying speed is very useful. Flying speed is crazy useful. Giving yourself a flying speed equal to your walking speed. And again, you have to use the dash action to do this, so you've just doubled your walking speed. There really isn't a downside to that. I think that's super cool to have a flying monk. I think it is. Yeah, there's a lot of things you could do with a flying speed. Like, monks are already super cool because they can run on walls and stuff like that, which I love doing. Just giving them the ability to fly for 2 key points. Chef's kiss, Salt Bay, whatever you want to call it. Like, I just love it. I think it's cool. So again, the jump distance feels a little bit underpowered. Understand why, because that's what Step of the Wind did. Because Step of the Wind in D&D is you can spend a key point to take the disengage or dash action as a bonus action on your turn, and your jump distance is doubled for that turn. Really, the reason you would use Step of the Wind was either to disengage or to dash. The jump thing is almost never used with Step of the Wind in 5th edition, or in D&D. So I can understand why they made that. Yeah. The other thing I like about Focus just in general is all the Focus abilities get upgrades at 11th level. And the reason that's a big deal is just like in D&D 5th edition, 20th level is the highest level you can get. So 11th level marks a pretty big increase in power because it's impossible to get 2 11th level abilities. So you no longer have to worry about multi-classing and getting multiple levels of multiple classes at the same level that get that same really powerful thing. That's why paladins at 11th level start getting additional damage. Like you see a huge power increase at 11th level. And I like the fact that Focus kind of accepts the fact that, yeah, 11th level, things change. Tier 3 adventures are very different than Tier 2. Massively different. Everybody gets more powerful, especially if you've been only a single class. It's one of the reasons why multi-classing tends to be really useful at lower levels, and when you get to higher levels, multi-classing becomes a detriment because the power difference between getting even like a third or fourth, an additional third or fourth level of ability, or 5th level, since 4th level is just a feat, is going to pale compared to getting an 11th or a 12th level of ability. So I like the fact that it mentions, oh, by the way, at 11th level, everything's going to change, and so are these. So yeah, overall, again, this monk will put the D&D monk will run circles around them. So this is not something that you can mix and match. That being said, I like it. I think it's cool. Finally, at 2nd level, you get Monastic Vows. This is the complexity. For the people that think there's not enough complexity in 5th edition, this is how Star Wars 5e deals with that. And compared to other things, like I've looked into other things like Level Up, Advanced 5th edition is something that tries to do something very similar, and I think they do it very, very poorly. From everything I've been able to read, I haven't been able to get the books yet, but everything I've been able to read, they tried to turn it into Pathfinder, which doesn't work. This, however, effectively, every class is now a warlock. And what I mean by that is Monastic Vows is the monk version of Eldritch Invocations. Every single class in Star Wars 5e has their own version of Eldritch Invocations. They're a list of features you can add to your class a la carte, effectively, to allow you to customize them. Effectively, they're bonus feats that are class specific. Again, I don't like 3rd edition. I can play 3rd edition. I can play 3.5. I can play Pathfinder, and I can even play Pathfinder 2nd Edition if you give me long enough to learn the damn thing. But I think the biggest problem with all of those systems is they're too complex. They just add complexity for complexity's sake, and the number of options that they give you tends to be redundant because there's a few of them that are always going to be more useful than literally everything else. So despite the fact that they give you 10 options, there's really only one or two that you're ever going to choose. But by giving you 10 options, they also have to put all these other controls in to deal with the fact that you theoretically could choose any of these options, and it becomes this massive convoluted clusterfuck. The Monastic Vows and all the other ones, from what I have read, I think this is a happy medium. If you're someone that likes 5th edition but feels too limited by it, because 5th edition, the entire design philosophy behind 5th edition is reduce needless complexity. That was the reason 3rd edition caused new D&D players to stagnate. That is the reason why 2nd edition players stuck to playing 2nd edition. Anyone that was playing 1st edition or original D&D when 2nd edition came out, the vast majority of them moved over to 2nd edition. However, when 3rd edition came out, a large group of people didn't stop playing 2nd edition. When 4th edition came out, those 2nd edition players didn't come back to play 4th edition. Because again, it was still complex. It wasn't as complex as 3rd edition, but it was still super, super complex. 5th edition was the first time we saw 2nd edition, 1st edition, original D&D people actually coming back to D&D because they got rid of all the needless complexity. Any complexity that is built into 5th edition to D&D has a purpose and is the least amount of complexity required to give you additional choices. That isn't true about 3rd edition. It's definitely not true about 3.5. It's not true about Pathfinder. And it's super, 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 super not true about Pathfinder 2nd edition. They just keep adding more systems thinking that makes it better. And it doesn't. It just means that it's significantly harder to get new people to play it because it's just too complicated. The Monastic Vows, which they list all of them at the end, very similar to how the Warlock does it in D&D. We'll go over them when we get to them, but overall, I think if you are the kind of person that's looking for a little bit more customizability, if you're looking for a little bit more complexity than what D&D 5th edition offers, I think this is an adequate way to deal with that. I think it works. So yeah. So that's 2nd level. I'm gonna drink real quick. So the defining features of the monk are martial arts, unarmored defense, focus. Almost identical to the monk of D&D. The big difference being unarmored movement doesn't show up until 3rd level for the Star Wars monk, whereas for D&D it's a defining feature. You can say because martial arts lets you take the dash action as a bonus action, unarmored movement now is kind of an upgrade to martial arts, so that hypermobility is still a part of the monk, despite the fact that it no longer counts as a quote-unquote defining feature because it shows up too late. I don't really see that being a huge issue. I'm slightly confused as to why they did it, but I guess it's probably because they added Monastic Vows at 2nd level, and that's another quote-unquote defining feature of the monk, despite the fact that every class gets their own version of Monastic Vows. It is your sub-feats. So in that instance, it doesn't count as a defining feature because everybody gets it. Which is something that 5th edition worked very, very hard to not do. You didn't want, this is the rogue's version of blah, blah, or this is the wizard's version of blah, 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 blah. That was something that happened in 4th edition constantly and happened a lot in 3rd edition. It happened a lot more in 4th, but it happened a lot in 3rd edition as well. And it just meant that classes were more flavor than they were mechanically different, and we don't want to see that. And so, yeah, the Monastic Vows, because every class gets a different list of them, they don't quite run into the problem of, oh, this is the, this is the fighter's version of blah blah. So, yeah. So moving on at third level. This is another thing I find kind of interesting. Third level for the monk, you got deflect missiles, and then your monastic tradition, your subclass. This you get unarmored movement, which is identical to unarmored movement from from D&D. And then you get deflect missiles, which is again, as far as I can tell, looks identical to deflect missiles. So those are exactly the same. And then you also choose your monastic order, which is your subclass. We will do monastic orders in a different video because this one's already it's already over an hour, so I'm definitely not going to do that. But that's how that works. The monastic orders that show up in the player's handbook, just to mention them, they have the Crimson Order, the Echani Order, the Matukai Order, and the Night Sister Order. So they actually have 4 subclasses instead of 3, and they don't really coincide with other ones. One thing I did find is in 5th edition, your subclass is going to massively change how you play. It is a huge, important decision that you make. In this, the abilities that the subclasses give, as from the ones I've been able to read through, are just not as useful. Most of your customizability is going to come from your vows, not from your subclass, which I think is a problem. I don't think it's a game-breaking problem, but I think it shows a misunderstanding of what subclasses are in 5th edition. So yeah, I think it also means that creating new subclasses is not going to be as rewarding or as game-changing as they are in 5th edition, because they don't do as much. Most monks are going to play very, very similarly, depending on the vows that you take, compared to in 5th edition, if you have different subclasses, you have different monks. They play very, very differently. So, yeah. So, yeah, third level. Pretty simple. Moving on. 4th level, again, identical. Ability score improvement and slow fall. They're exact same abilities. They're useful abilities. But if you want to learn more about both those abilities, we talked about them when I've covered the monk over and over and over again on this channel. 5th level, you get extra attack, again. And then you also get Stunning Strike. It's the exact same Stunning Strike. Again, the big difference is going to be, instead of your save DC being based on your wisdom, it can be based on your charisma. But it's still, again, one of the most useful abilities of the monk, because it messes with the action economy. Again, 5th edition, and this does not stray enough from D&D for this to be any less true. Action economy is the most important balancing aspect in the game. Whichever side has more things they can do in a turn is going to have an advantage always, every single time. That's how it works. So Stunning Strike, being able to take out movement, action, bonus action, and reaction for a target, and again, the monk can now make up to 5 Stunning Strikes once they get to level 11. That can take out a lot of baddies. That can massively change the battlefield. And again, I know quite a few DMs that think Stunning Strike is broken. It's not. It never has been. It's just a problem if your only way to challenge your players is to throw really, really powerful monsters at them. It's not the only way to challenge players. Even in combat encounters, that is not the only way to challenge players, and monks are specifically built to be able to take care of really, really powerful monsters. Like, that's what they're built around. So, yeah, Stunning Strike is always, always, always useful. Moving on. 6th level, you get Enhanced Strikes. Again, exact same thing from D&D. It's called Key Empowered Strikes there, but it's hey, because they don't have magic, the resistance is to unenhanced attacks and damage instead of non-magical. So that's all it is. 7th level, you get Evasion. Again, identical to the Monk. And you also get Stillness of Mind. Evasion itself, again, is just for saving throw, for dex saves. If you make your save, you take no damage. If you fail your save, you only take half damage. Again, it just is really useful. Stillness of Mind, you can use a... oh, that's interesting. So they do change Stillness of Mind a little bit. So D&D Stillness of Mind, you can use your action to end one effect on yourself that's causing you to be charmed or frightened. Stillness of Mind for Star Wars, you can use your action or bonus action to end one effect on yourself that is causing you to be charmed or frightened. This is where things, because actions are almost always going to be more valuable than bonus actions. The 4th edition version of them is you had major actions and minor actions. And they were called that specifically because major actions were always more useful than minor actions. So being able to let you use Stillness of Mind as a bonus action, I think flirts with the line of it being a little bit too powerful. I have used Stillness of Mind on my Shadow Monk that I played the Adventurers League. We went up against a vampire. He charmed me, despite the fact that I had really good scores. He charmed me. When it got to my turn, I just used my action to uncharm, and I got to go on with my day. It is an incredibly useful ability in specific situations. This makes it significantly more useful. Again, I would have to play test it, but again, with everything being more powerful in Star Wars, I guess it makes sense that you can use it as a bonus action instead of an action. I don't see a situation where you would ever want to use it as an action instead of a bonus action, but I guess it is kind of nice to have the option of choosing one or the other. I guess the one situation I could see it being useful is if you did want to use Patient Defense to draw some attacks. You would want to use your action to break out of it and then move where you want, and then Patient Defense to draw some attacks. But other than like that very specific, or if you needed to flee, using Step of the Wind and flying, other than those specific instances, I see people I don't see people ever using, or just very rarely ever using the action to use Stillness of Mind when they can use their bonus action instead. So yeah. Moving on. 13th level, again identical. You get Purity of Body, immune to disease and poison, and resistant to poison damage. Ooh, that's a little bit different. So Purity of Body in D&D, you're immune to disease and poison. Which also means you're immune to poison damage. This particularly says you're immune to disease and poison and resistant to poison damage. So this is the first time I've seen them actually limit an ability instead of making it more powerful, which I find interesting. It's another thing that I see bad DMs complain about. It's like, oh, well, poison damage is so useless because so many classes get immunity to poison. Yeah, I can see some. Again, it's DMs that are kind of one-trick ponies. They're like, well, I throw poison at my enemy, at my players because poison is a remarkably useful status effect to inflict on enemies. You're disadvantaged on effectively everything. It is super, super useful. So players getting immunity to the poison condition, if that's your big trick, yeah, it's going to make it very, very difficult for you to challenge your players. So those are generally the people I see complaining about the poison immunity stuff. And it also means things like green dragons are not nearly as dangerous to monks as they are to any other class. But again, it made sense for monks. Like it did mean that throwing a green, an ancient green dragon at a monk meant that they were going to be able to one-shot them or be able to take them one-on-one. No, I don't think there's a single monster in any monster manual ever that only does poison damage, and that's the only thing they can do. So yeah, I find it interesting that they made resistance instead of just leaving the blanket immunity. It might have been because again, people have asked, and does that mean they're immune to poison damage? And I believe Crawford has ruled yes, monks are immune to poison damage, and I think paladins are as well. But yeah, it's part of being a monk. Again, monks have have lower AC than most other classes because despite the fact that they can add stuff to their AC, they can't wear magic armor that increases their AC. They can't just get better armor to increase their AC. So the immunity to poison damage, eventually getting getting the ability to be proficient in all saving throws. Those are all things done to allow the monk to kind of exist when everyone else can have like +3 plate mail, or +2 studded leather armor and get significantly higher AC than monks can ever get. And again, monks are frontline fighters, so they can't kind of stay back like a ranger can and just shoot arrows, or even like a rogue. Shooty rogues, as I affectionately call them, are a really useful thing. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's purity of body. Interesting. At 14th level, you get Diamond Soul, which is, again, proficiency in all saving throws, and you can reroll a saving throw, use a key point to reroll it. Not a huge change there, but when we get to 15th level, I'm going to drink again. When we get to 15th level, you get Timeless Vessel, which is similar. Timeless Body is what they have for D&D, and it's basically you can't be aged magically, and you basically stop. You stop physically aging. You can still die of old age, but you don't get any of the physical things. You just eventually die from it. And you no longer need food or water. This one, they get rid of you don't need food or water, which I find interesting. But they add a different feature. Additionally, when you complete a short rest, you could expend a hit die to remove 1 level of exhaustion or slowed. So that is a really, really big change. Exhaustion is the most damaging condition you can get. 6 levels of exhaustion, your character insta-dies. 5 levels of exhaustion, they are effectively dead. They can't do anything, they're just not dead. Exhaustion is really, really bad, and higher level monsters start getting the ability to just give out levels of exhaustion. So the ability to get rid of a level of exhaustion on a short rest is a big deal, especially since monks are going to be a little bit short rest focused. They need short rest to get their focus back and things like that. So yeah, it just makes short rest that much more useful. Again, I'm not sure if other classes get, again, this is the first class I've done a deep dive into, so I don't know if other classes get something like this, but it is something that's kind of interesting for the monk. And I would hope that would mean that exhaustion is used even more so in Star Wars 5e, because as much as there are some really, really bad monsters in 5th edition that give out levels of exhaustion, they are relatively rare because of how bad exhaustion is and because of how difficult it is to get rid of. Basically, you lose 1 level of exhaustion per long rest, or you can cast Greater Restoration and remove a single level of exhaustion. So it is really hard to get rid of. This, you can just kick a bunch of hit die and get rid of a level of exhaustion. They do specifically say when you complete a short rest, you could expend a hit die to remove 1 level of exhaustion or slow. So from that wording, I would say you cannot spend multiple hit dice in a single long rest to remove multiple levels of exhaustion, but this is still pretty damn useful. Moving on. At 18th level, you get Empty Body. It's the exact same thing. I do find it kind of interesting. They changed some damage types in Star Wars just because, again, magic isn't a thing in Star Wars. But they do specifically say you have all resistance, or you have, the way Empty Body works, you spend 4 focus points, you become invisible for a minute, and during that time you have resistance to all damage but force damage. I believe, I may not be 100% right, but I believe force damage in D&D, force damage is just kind of nondescript magic damage, is what force damage is kind of expected to be. I believe in Star Wars, force damage is actually damage done by the Force. So if that is true, I find that kind of useful and funny. But yeah, it's the same thing as Empty Body for the monk, which again is still a very, very useful ability. There's no changes to it, so nothing I need to elaborate on. Finally, the 20th level, you get Perfect Self. Now, this is something that is kind of interesting. It kind of fits in with the idea that, again, monks, everything in Star Wars 5e is going to be a little bit more powerful than stuff in regular D&D for 5e. Perfect Self in D&D is just if you roll initiative and have no key points you're gaining, you gain 4 key points. This one has 2 different things. First, your dexterity and wisdom or charisma, your choice, increase by 2. Your maximum for these scores increases by 2 as well. So it's very similar to kind of the barbarian thing where their strength and con goes up. This is your dex and wisdom go up, which means at 20th level, monks bare minimum go up 2 AC, which is nice. It also means a bunch of other things get better, but I like that. Perfect Self feels slightly underwhelming as a 20th level ability. It's not super underwhelming, but slightly. And then additionally for Perfect Self in Star Wars, when you roll for initiative and have fewer than 6 focus points remaining, you regain up to 6 focus points. So this one is even more different than Perfect Self. Perfect Self encourages you to use all your key points. If you have 4 or less key points, it is in your best interest to use all your key points before the fight ends. Otherwise, when you roll initiative again, even if you have 1 key point, you don't get your 4 key points. You have to be at 0 for Perfect Self to work. So it does give a high incentive to, if you're low on key points, use all of them. Otherwise, you're going to be at a disadvantage. This one is, hey, every time you roll initiative, you're going to have 6 key points. Whether you start with 0 key points or whether you start with 5, whatever, it's always going to be reset to 6. So it's a little bit more key points, which again fits in with the idea that Star Wars is just a little, everybody's a little bit more powerful. And it doesn't penalize you if you don't burn all your key points before your next combat and counter. And again, I'm not really against any of those. Perfect Self feels like a 20th level ability for Star Wars for 5e. For D&D 5e, yeah, it works as a 20th level ability, and 4 key points is nothing to be ashamed of. But I think I prefer the Star Wars Perfect Self better. I like the increase in Dex and Wisdom, the increase in the max. Like I think that's cool and interesting. And it means that at 20th level monk, you still feel very powerful when you hit 20th level. Whereas for a D&D monk, going from 19th level, like 19th level, you get a feat or ability score improvement, and then 20 you get your capstone. And it just, you just don't feel as powerful compared to like a 19th level monk and a 20th level monk feel very similar in power. So yeah, I think Perfect Self works well. I know I mentioned I was going to do Monastic Vows in this video, but we're at an hour and a half. I don't want this video to be that long. So Let's do final thoughts. So overall, I like this version of the monk. Again, I'm a huge fan of being able to make dexterity checks to grapple. I think that's something that should be in 5th edition, so I'm happy that it's here. The fact that you can disengage as a bonus action with no key points, I think is a little bit interesting. It definitely means that martial arts is significantly more powerful than the D&D version, but again, that's how Star Wars 5e works. The fact that you can go wisdom or charisma, I think, is really, really interesting, and it means that it means that you can create different monks than you could before. And then focus, where flurry of blows, patient defense, step of the wind, not only all modify something from martial arts, but also get better at 11th level, I think is super cool. Everything else about this just makes sense. There's not a ton of changes from D&D to Star Wars, other than the monastic vows, and we'll go over those in the next video. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the monk, as much as I know a lot of people will argue with me, I think the monk in 5th edition is one of the better designed classes. Is it perfect? No. But once you understand how to play the monk in D&D for 5e, it is my favorite class. It is definitely the class that I feel gives you the most choices in what you want to do in a lot of different situations. And I think there are very few things that I think you can do to improve the monk. So looking at the Star Wars version of it, I think they realized that, and they didn't really need to make a ton of changes. Obviously, the Monastic Vows do make some pretty big modifications, but we'll talk about those in the next video. Otherwise, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important for other people being able to see this. In the comments down below, what are you thinking about a Star Wars monk? Do you like the fact that they still have the monk for Star Wars for 5e? Do you think they don't really fit in the Star Wars universe? Are you not a fan of Donnie Yen? And if so, why not? Donnie Yen's amazing. I love him. Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.